Go ahead.
How did the idea of
conditioning starting? Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead, JD.
With the conditioning starting this week, and you want to see guys report back in the best shape, how have you found how they reported back? Were you pleased with what you've seen? Yeah, look, we're in the early parts of it, but we're basically lifting and running. We're in meetings, and then in the afternoon, we're having a walkthrough of the installation. So, guys are moving around well. They're doing a lot of running, and it's a little different than just putting them flat out through that conditioning test and then kind of coming back with an idea. So we're trying to build up, be smart, and yet, I think overall the logistics have worked. We're handling that well. We'll continue to do that here for the better part of this week into next week, and then transition into, more of a conventional practice.
Sean, how did the idea of the hotel come about, the Lowe's Hotel? And also, is that something you'd like to see other teams maybe try to do as well?
Well, look, I can't speak for the other teams. It was really just looking at the percentages, all right? And if there's 80 players and then another, call it 90 or 95 people, coaching, training, equipment, total number of people in your first or second tier, let's call it 170. So basically every day, those 170 go home and then come back the next day. So you have 170 stories each day. And so you might be, like we were to start, pretty much clean by our players, and yet every day is a new day. And then you take that and you times it by 7. And then you take that and times it, by 4 weeks in a month, and then do the season. And look, statistically speaking, there are going to be. So it's really about trying to reduce the possible exposures, not eliminate, because, like I said, it's not mandatory, and certainly, people that are staying at the hotel at some point might have a chance to see their family, their kids, and all of that. But you're just trying to reduce those numbers, and I think that can just help your team then. And I use this example with the players. I said, what do you think is going to happen to the teams that make the postseason this year? Like I would tell you, I think there'll be less positive tests during the postseason around the league, because teams will at some point say, you know what, this is too important at this time of the year. And so it'd be hard-pressed for me to see anyone testing positive before the championship weekend or the Super Bowl weekend. They'll begin to quarantine themselves or find a way to be smart about that. So it's just trying to look outside or think outside the box.
Sean, are you guys keeping the hotel all season then, or is that just a training camp thing?
No, what we're doing right now leads us all the way through to training camp, and then now that's a month away before the start of the regular season, a little bit past that. And look, that's a long time relative to a pandemic. Hopefully that there's more things by that time we can do, but this is something that we're doing during training camp, and hopefully it can help us reduce our numbers.
Was it a group decision, Sean? Was it your idea? Was it Mickey's idea? I guess kind of the genesis of where it actually started.
Yeah, well, look, it was me and Mickey talking about how can we take the protocol given to us by the league and then further improve on it. Because look, clearly we've got a grasp now of 8 days or 9 days in, right? You guys would agree. We've seen the first 9 days. Well, the next 9 days are probably going to be similar to the past 9, and the next 9, in other words, you guys don't see it. And so I don't know what the total head count is, but that's kind of, I think, going to be what we can expect throughout the year. And then there's a little bit of luck involved there, and we've seen a couple head coaches or a head coach and various players. And so, how do we reduce our chances of being one of those people? But Mickey and I have been talking about it, and and really looking at ways to be a little bit better than just the norm. Because I think if we just go along with the standard, here it is, then you're going to have what you've had the last few weeks, and then there's a randomness to just because you're clean as a team heading into your second week. Shoot, 11 guys can be the next week or the next week, and I just there's too much at stake, especially for the players.
Sean, when you were talking with the team about this, did you also just make a reference to being smart about your decisions with what you do with the free time? And
yeah, I'm not even talking about. Look, I'm assuming it goes without saying. The bars or restaurant. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about 170 stories just going home. You guys all have a different story going home, and so whether maybe you live alone, maybe you live with a spouse, 3 kids, maybe 2 kids, but each day there are multipliers there. Do the math, and so we're certainly trying to be smart and limit our outside contact. But when you're not operating in a clean bubble like the NHL or NBA or even in Australia, I think their rugby or Australian rules football, they're working from a bubble. When you're not in one of those bubbles, then you're going to have positive tests. I don't care all the tracing and all the social distancing and all the beepers you wear or everything that we have in place in the building. You're playing tackle football, you're lockering next to each other, and that's so you just have to understand, hey, there's going to be a certain amount of positive tests. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that's not the case. And so I listened to Doug Marrone the other day. They had 6 players test positive. The first 4 questions were, was Doug following the protocol? Was Jacksonville? Yeah, sure he was. Look, this plan is got. There's a ton of things that are still at large relative to what to expect. And so how do we improve on that? How do we make the numbers kind of work in our favor?
Sean, with it not being mandatory, have you got a pretty good feel for how receptive the players are going to be or have been to it?
It's been good. It's been good. I think we'll have a good majority of that group of 170, and I'm sure there'll be a handful of players that, people that won't be, and yet that's fine. But we've already improved our chances. If we can take that number 170 down to 25, then we've certainly helped ourselves, right?
Sean, have your players had a chance? I know you can't do helmets and pads yet, but I think a lot of us have seen like the splash shields and the performance masks. Have you maybe encouraged your players to start using some of that or get comfortable with it in preparation for starting a world?
Yeah, it's available, and I think the jury's still out on some of that. When you breathe, there's still a big ventilative hole right there. So, like anything else, I'm a little skeptical relative to not the full mask that we wear or a full plastic, but when it comes to playing football and trying to breathe, and then, so look, that's an option that's available. I'm anxious to see any studies that we've been able to, or see some experts' opinions on it, but it's available. Yeah, I've seen it.
Hey, Sean, we know about the players who opted out. Did anyone else in the organization choose to opt out? I mean, I think the rest is voluntary from team to team. Has everyone else, coaches, staff, decided to continue for the whole season?
As far as I know, yeah. Look, we don't have a union, and I don't even know, that would be handled team by team. But yeah, there hadn't been anybody that has decided to sit out up till this point.
Sean, going back to the like some of the stuff that y'all are incorporating this year, whether it's the splash shields or the beepers, is there anything that you're seeing technology-wise that you think is kind of a cool innovation or something that'll last even beyond this season?
No, I can't think of any. Look, the tracers are pretty simple, and yet there's been a ton of technical errors with those already. the tracers measure how long you're in someone's company if you're inside 6 feet, right? So if I'm next to player A, and player A tests positive, and they do a little history check on player A, and it shows, here were the people that were near him inside 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes. But we've had a number of these that player A registers that he was next to Coach Payton for 18 minutes, and then mine registers that I was next to him for 29 minutes. And so, again, there's some glitches there. But I understand the tracing, and I think it's beneficial. I do think it makes people aware of where they're at. But I can't think offhand of something other than what we've learned from our Zoom meetings in the off season and the ability to communicate and meet. I think that doesn't just start with football. I think as a world, I think businesses will look at travel differently relative to the ability to meet via video conference.
Do you feel like you guys have been able to get legitimate, good football work done through all this? Has all this been a big distraction, or when you sit down to do football work, do you feel like you're getting quality football work done?
Well, look, we're in the early portion of training camp, and I mean, we're in walkthroughs and meetings. Yeah, we're definitely getting our installations taught, and we're having that opportunity on the field to cover what we've coached. But I think to your question, which is a good question, the ability to focus for each team this year is going to be important relative to the outside. And I don't use the word noise, but the outside things that can pull your focus away from the game. And so it's not until next week that we really get into, really more of a practice setting. But I do think that I think the early week and a half here has been certainly the emphasis on protocols and what we are doing has been much different than normal. But as we, like anything else, as you continue to get used to that, I think that focus then begins to diminish a little bit and shift towards the key objective. The mornings are different for everyone. You pull up, you head to the testing station, you get your temperature taken, you get your swab test done, you step out, then you go in and you get your tracer, you put it around your wrist, and after 12 hours, if you're still at the building, they replace it because it runs out of battery life. And so some of the glitches that we're working through, that I'm sure every teams are working through, hopefully we can clean up, but eventually you're at work.
I don't know,
Sean. The other day, Drew Brees told us that he worked on he made it a goal, I guess, to improve his arm strength this off season. I'm interested to know, is that something you all noticed with him? I know he's 41. It's probably inevitable, but is it something you all have noticed on tape? And how big a factor has that been for your deep passing game in the past?
Well, look, our numbers down the field are still strong. His numbers down the field are strong. And I think every year he's that type of player that's constantly looking for little ways to improve. He's throwing the ball with great accuracy, timing. And, I'm sure he's looking at, as he looks at the season, and it might be a particular 3 plays or 5 plays, but it's constantly working on an area that he sees possibly where he can improve. I don't know that there was this consensus coming off of one season. I think gradually where he's at, obviously, you're combating that age and you're combating some of the challenges both physically and then mentally. And I'm anxious to see as we get into these practices some of the things always that he's worked on. Tom does a great job. Tom House out in California, and Drew's very committed to every detail that he can cover. But I think numbers wise, I feel like we as an offense are still getting the ball into the spots we need to down the field relative to opportunities for the receivers or tight ends. And you know, he's been someone who's been very good down the field in pass completions or yards, explosive plays that way.
Sean, yesterday, DeMario was saying when he blitzes, he tries to approach it like a basketball player reading the court and seeing angles. How do you see his intelligence kind of show up in that aspect of his game and, you know, the ability to see the field when he's rushing the passer, blitzing?
Well, look, I think he that's something he does well. You know, so some linebackers are pressure players that have a knack for taking on a block or timing it up, and some players aren't as talented at that. But I do think it's something he does well. He's got power. He's got good lower body strength, and I think obviously the experience in our defense. And for him, you see that improvement. We've seen it now since he's been here, and so, yeah. I mean, I think for him, I'm sure the game has begun to slow down because of the consistency relative to what we're doing, terminology-wise, and how we're doing it. But clearly, he's one of those guys that that we feel like can impact the game in a positive way when he blitzes.
Sean, with the league being cognizant of diversity, you had got a guy who's been in the organization a long time, got a promotion, in Terry Fontenot. Could you talk about him a little?
Yeah, Terry's been with us for as long as I can remember. Both, in personnel, he's in charge of pro personnel. He's done a great job. He's someone I see daily. He and Jeff both. One's in pro, one's in college. Are constantly guys that are looking at ways to help our team. They're guys that Mickey and I trust very much, and I think you're going to see it won't be long before he's a general manager. But he'll spend a ton of time digging on tape, and I think that it's part of the reason we've been able to bring in guys that have played well, from other teams. So there's a vision. We kind of go through the pros and cons to signing a player like DeMario or any free agent that we bring in. But we're fortunate to have him.
Sean, I don't know if this is possible to answer until you actually see it happen, but do you think there's any possibility that, if they take crowds out of some of these stadiums that, it changes the atmosphere, there's less pressure? Do you think that could affect performance? Like, could it impact kickers maybe if they don't feel the pressure? Is there anything like that you maybe foresee?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think quickly golf is getting used to it. The other sports are getting used to it. I just think it's different, and then pretty soon, you're playing. I think the one area you look at, a place like Seattle or Kansas City or Minnesota or New Orleans, there's a few teams that have a real loud stadiums, that kind of maybe neutralizes that. But, it is what it is. I don't know that I don't know that specifically. I think your question is a good one relative to kickers, but I don't know if we'll see. There's still, look, if you're kicking a 41-yard field goal to win a game, and it's loud or it's dead silent, all right, there's still that pressure felt by the kicker to win this game for his team. So I think it'll be something you just get used to. I'm sure there'll be some ambient noise that the league will want to play just to help with the network feed. But outside of that, it's a good question. I'm anxious to see how it actually, it'll be different, clearly.
Sean, what have you been able to do with Jameis Winston so far, you personally, as far as coaching and spending time with him, and what are your impressions?
Look, he's been in what we're doing meeting-wise, walkthrough-wise, lifting, and we're out on the field during the walkthroughs. So just like everyone else, he's in good shape. He's lean, lost weight, he's lean. He's a guy he's not afraid to work. And, so he's doing well. He's fit in well. And again, we're just into this thing now. Last week we were COVID testing, so he COVID tested well last week too. All right, last question.
you've never had to obviously go through a situation like this before, but does practice present enough material to evaluate a quarterback, especially with somebody new like Jameis?
Well, we've got to find a way to do that. I think you're going to see we've got enough padded practices, and we're gonna find a way to get the reps we need and prepare our team as best we can. I think Bill said it the other day. It's similar to what colleges have done for years. And I coached in college. You had scrimmages. You didn't get the luxury of playing preseason games. So the overall cut down to your 53 will present some challenges because, look, each year there's something that takes place in a preseason game where a guy steps up maybe and does something unique that all of a sudden gets him on a team. And so there'll be a little bit more pressure on the down-the-line guys, the younger guys that are trying to find a spot.